I'll make it quick. I'm sure you'll appreciate it.
Hey!
I just want to welcome everybody on behalf of the Greenwood Heritage. And I'll just reassure you that it's going to be a little quickie here. I would invite everybody to come up to MacArthur Centre afterwards. That's where the main people are going to be talking, and there'll be displays and everything else up there. Our purpose here right now is just to unveil a bronze statue of a miner that depicts over the years. This fella here actually happens to be a hard rock miner. And we have an ore car, and the ore car is one of the old original ones that they used to push by hand. It wasn't the ones that were mechanically assisted as they were later on. So, is Nathan here? Nathan. Nathan Scott is with Livingstone Sculptor. He's the gentleman that was very patiently taking all the information and conveying it into the statue itself. There was a lot of work that took place researching and making sure that it was period correct, and he really put a lot of detail into it. So big hand to Nathan. Thank you. And Roland, are you here, Roland? Put your hand up if you're here. I don't see him. Roland Henning is the...
I don't think he's here.
No, Roland Henning is the fellow that donated the ore car and the rails that go with it. They're going to be gone today because they're not affixed right now, and they could roll downhill by mistake. Read between the lines. And the story behind this one is Roland, years ago as a young man, went up the hill at 7 years of age, and he found the car, but he lost it. He couldn't locate it again for quite a period of time. So some family members happened to go a little higher up into the mountain, and basically right over the top from where we are now, there's a number over the years, a lot of mine shafts that were put in and small operations, and this was from one of the sites, but it was minus the axle and the wheels. So he went a little further over and found another shaft, went down, tied a rope to a tree, and found wheels and an axle. So, if fate be it, he was able to put them all together, and what you see here now is being dedicated to go along with this fellow. And what I would like to do as well is, whereabouts is Mr. Mayor Smith? Right here. There you are. I want to introduce you to those that haven't met him, Mayor Smith. And our president of the Heritage Society, Doreen, you're where? There you are. Good. I'm in behind everybody. And there's a lot of people that went in to help, but another fellow that is assisting, because there'll be lights, etc., onto the statue later, is Cornell Hansen. And I don't know if Cornell is here.
He's down south.
Yeah, he's probably someplace that's colder. Yeah. No, we'll do the unveiling, but before we do it, I'll just give you a little bit of a history or the relevance of the statue. And the whole idea was, it's Heritage Week. And I don't know if you realize that. So this went tied in with the project of having something of Greenwood that would depict our heritage. And heritage doesn't mean it goes back 150 or whatever years. It goes back from right now. How many of you have relations that came to this country, settled in the area, had sawmills, mechanic shops, electricians, you name it, over the years, and families that settled as a result of the mining industry? And a lot of people did move into the area, brought their families in, or brought them along after. A lot of the activity took place back in the 1850s. There was gold rushes in Australia, United States, up in the Klondike and the Yukon. But we had a lot of ore and different minerals here. So people did come over, and they settled all through the region. Rock Creek and Camp McKinley, and those are a few examples. Another thing too, you're feeling a little bit chilly right now.
We are.
Just reflect on it. How many of the miners over the years experienced this without the luxuries we have now, and how many of their families that came along lived in old housing? So it's a chance to think back a little bit and just look at what's taking place. So people are asking why we chose today. We had to go back a few months ago and set a date. and be arranged to have sunny weather and no snow. We lucked out on one of them. Excuse me. So, with that in mind, I just want to welcome the miner back home, because he does represent everything that's taken place. When you go up to MacArthur Centre, there'll be a number of people speaking, some about current mining, but mostly about the history. A lot of history and pictures. Excuse me. So what I'll ask is for members of the city, the mayor, and all the members that are involved with the city, and the museum members, to come along, pick a spot in the rope, and we'll do the unveiling. If there's questions and whatnot afterwards, the hall's a good warm place. You may. One more thing. Don't be startled. Part of the air horn, this year on the end of the building, we have an old air horn that's rigged up that the miners used to use to know what time it was, when to go to work, and when to, otherwise, when to expect them back. So wait. Okay, everybody ready? What I'm going to do?
It's getting too cold. Come on. Go for it. Yeah, come on. You can do it.
1, 2, 3. Group 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much, everybody. And we'll see you up in the hall.
No, I
If anybody needs a coffee or whatever, I would ask that they grab it right now. We'll start in about 2 minutes. Thank everybody for coming over, and thank those for attending down at the museum at the assay office. It's appreciated. And I knew it was cold, so now you can warm up. Basically, what we're here for, not only doing the recognition of all the nice work that was done in the sculpting, is it's Heritage Week. So it gives everybody a chance to reflect back on their own past and others that are in the area and what they've contributed to the province. Now, we do have some guests that I would like to introduce. Now, first off, what I'd like to do, because I know Nathan has to head off. Nathan, whereabouts are you? If I can get you to stand. There, he's at the back. I just want to give a really heartfelt acknowledgement to Nathan for all the work he did. It takes a long time to do what he did, and the art that went into it is unbelievable. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I don't think I'll do it at the same time. Is Roland here? I don't think he's here yet. He's probably still at work. But again, Roland for the ore card. So what we'll do is I'd like to go through the different levels of government that were involved and that helped out with this project. It wasn't something that took place overnight. It started a long time ago, and there was a lot of people that put work into it. So first off, with at the federal level, we've got our MP, Richard Kenny. He's here. He's put his hand up, and he covers. He is the representative for the South Okanagan, the west boundary. So you've probably read a lot that he's been putting in the different flyers and in the paper, but here's a chance to see the man himself. So thank you for attending. And if there's anybody afterwards that wants to talk to anybody or say anything, we'll get through the agenda, we'll finish up, and then there'll be an opportunity for people to get together and socialize and be able to find out everything that's here, both the visual displays and the people that are here as well. So Richard, thank you very much for being in attendance. And did you want to say anything briefly? A few words. This is asking a politician.
I know. I was going to stay back, but now.
Thank you.
I'll just be very brief and say congratulations to everybody who worked on this project. It's so great that Greenwood can promote its mining history, promote its heritage like this. I really appreciate it. My mother-in-law was born in Anaconda. My grandfather came to Canada from England in 1907 and worked in the gold mines in Fairview by Oliver. So, you know, I think we all have that mining heritage somewhere in our past, and so it's great that we have a place where we can celebrate that here in Greenwood. And so I wanted to thank everybody who worked on this project and who's been, I'm a real fan of museums, so all these people who toil often unheralded in community museums across the country, I really appreciate the work. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And at the provincial level, the Minister of Tourism, Lisa Bear, was unable to attend. She sends her regrets. And we also had an invitation for our MLA, Linda Larson, and she was unable to attend as well. But now we go to more of a local level, and we have our regional district for I had area A, but it's not South. B? E, Edward. Okay, Vicky. Gee, are you around, Vicky?
I am.
There you are. Would you like to say anything, please? And if you can't hear, well, then we'll change it.
Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me. It's really great to be here, and I'm especially glad to be indoors. It was pretty cold out there. I just wanted to very briefly talk about the historical projects that we're working on in the Boundary. You guys may have heard of this from other places, but we're now looking at an application that will help anybody who's in the area identify where our historic sites are. And I see this as a really great asset for not only tourism, for visitors here, but also for the rest of us that continue to explore our area. And boy, I've never been in a community with so many people, you know, across the Boundary interested in history and people actively involved in all the different associations, volunteering their time. And it's just really good to see all that energy. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have our Mayor, Ed Smith, with us, and Ed would like to share a few thoughts as well.
Welcome to all attending this Memorial Day. Memorable Day, not Memorial. We'll get to it. As well, I'm going to repeat this, but a special welcome to MP Richard Canning and also Regional District Area E, Vicky G. Thank you for coming out. And all the people doing presentations, and who will be properly introduced later. And it was 6 months ago, roughly, when I was introduced to Mr. Nathan Scott, and he explained the plans for the statue, and today here we are. It's completed. A great job, Nathan, for that. It was, the minor statue is certainly a proud addition to the city of Greenwood. And it is, and always will be, an eye stopper, as they call it, for the tourists and travelers through Greenwood. It is also celebrating the Canada's 150th birthday. Last but not least is the people who are involved in making this happen. The staff of the museum, led by Doreen McLean, the city staff led by CAO Wendy Agashi, and all involved. There's a lot of people that were involved in this, working together for the best of the community. On behalf of the city, myself, and council, thank you. Have a great
Thank you, Mayor. Now, there's other people to acknowledge, and there was quite a few people involved. One of the people that we'd like to, where's Barry? Barry Knowles. Barry, you've seen him around with Founders Day, and he's done quite a bit to encourage young people to see what's involved with the mining. Also, he was instrumental in helping out coordinate the different mining groups to attend. So thank you, Barry. Appreciate it. Along with the acknowledgements, I'd like to thank and acknowledge all the people with the Boundary Museum and the Boundary Historical Society. I don't know if you're aware, but there's two groups, but we work hand in hand to try and cover as much of the history of the region as we can. So thank you very much. I want to acknowledge that. And along with the acknowledgements, and she won't come up, but I know she will now, with the museum, the president, Doreen McLean. Where are you, Doreen? You know, Doreen is quite humble. She doesn't want to say much, but we'll encourage her, and we want to thank her for everything that took place with this project and with many others that aren't even known about every day. So thank you.
Well, rather unexpected, but thank you all so very much for coming. And it's just tremendous to see such a wonderful turnout. I hope you all enjoy the bronze miner. It's a great addition to the Boundary and the mining history here. Thanks ever so much.
Thank you. Okay, you've got an agenda in front of you, and there's a number of people. We're going to rotate through and have the different people come up. As you can see, there's about half a dozen different groups that are identified, and each one is going to share and be able to fill us in a bit more about our past. Now, first on the agenda, the history of the Granby Mining Company. Lloyd Hardwick, who is the former manager of the Granby Mines in Phoenix, he was going to do the presentation. He's not here, but I do have his presentation, and I'll read it to you, and hopefully I can do justice to it. Okay, here we go, Lloyd. Brief history of the Granby Mining Company. I've been asked to speak about the history of the Granby Mining Company. This has been done a dozen times before, and all the production figures are available online and elsewhere. Therefore, I will not bore you with the dry, meaningless figures. Some dates have been given to provide some degree of continuity. The swift expansion of mineral development in Western North America was triggered by the discovery of gold in California in 1949. Tens of thousands of men rushed to the Golden State, seeking their fortunes, but most of them were disappointed, except perhaps for saloon keepers and lawyers. Many of these men had been miners elsewhere and turned to prospecting. They were joined by other latecomers and by veterans of the Civil War. In the remarkably short time of 45 years, the whole of the western states and southern BC had been investigated and many mines found. By 1894, all the important claims in the Boundary area had been staked and development work had begun. It was soon found that the ore bodies were huge but of low grade, and it would require mining on a large scale in order to bring operating costs down to reasonable levels. Some companies were formed to acquire properties the individual claim owners owned. And in 1899, two companies merged to form the Granby Consolidated Mining, Smelting and Power Company Limited, later mercifully shortened to the Granby Mining Company Limited. The best ore bodies in the camp were held by this company. Development was slow, as all heavy equipment had to be hauled from the nearest rail station in Blossburg, Washington, which was 75 miles away over poor trails. Another obstacle was the difficulty in obtaining financing, as the Rosslyn and Spokane mines were booming at the same time. Capital from Eastern Canada was finally secured to open up the mines and to erect the smelter. The coming of the CPR Railway in 1900 allowed ore shipments to reach the smelter, and Granby was in business. The company made a profit from the start, with dividends being paid and a large sum set aside to purchase new equipment and to acquire new mining properties. There were a number of Granby operation practices that may be of interest to the amateur historian. In some, machine was needed to reduce costs and increase efficiency the company would buy, or if unavailable, would make it themselves. Many of the products of the fertile mines of Granby, such as the Granby car, were copied and used worldwide. In 1903, there were 3 steam shovels at work in the surface cuts at the mine. One of the earliest attempts at open pit mining was steam shovels in Canada. The company's business practice would soon be considered as progressive by many standards. They allowed the foundation of a union even before production began, and labor relations was always amicable. They also had some form of profit sharing plan, which would have been radical at the time. By 1910, a consultant's report showed that the ore zone at Phoenix was getting smaller as the depth was attained, and that the mine had only about 6 years' supply of ore left. The dream that Granby was operating the greatest gold deposit in the known world was over. Before the bad news was released, the directors were ordered to hold on to their stock. The stock prices dropped from $151 to $23. And the directors took a beating along with the other shareholders. Such a policy is almost unheard of today. Fortunately for the company, they were on a sound financial basis and were able to buy the Antioch mine and smelter, which was located on Observatory Inlet, north of Prince Rupert. This mine and the smelter operated until 1935. After Phoenix closed in 1919, the company gained control of the Copper Mountain mine at Princeton, which operated, except for a 6-year period of low copper prices during the Depression, until the mid-50s. In 1956, Granby returned to Phoenix and began open pit mining, which lasted until 1978. In 1966, they began production at their Grand Isle copper mine, which was located on Babine Lake in central BC. This operation ran under the company name until 1982, at which time Noranda assumed ownership and Granby had been dissolved. For almost 80 years, the name of Granby has been synonymous with low-cost, low-grade copper mining. In 1960, the company was taken over by Pacific Clay Products of California, and shortly thereafter by Zapata Corporation of Houston, Texas. In 1981, the ownership passed to Noranda, which absorbed all the assets of the company, and the Granby name was no more. The Phoenix area mining claims were picked up by Kettle River Resources, and more recently have been opted by Golden Dawn Resources. It is hoped that the new operators will be successful in finding a new mine or two, and we wish them all well. And that's his presentation, and thank you for listening. Appreciate it. Now, next on our list for people is the history of the Mother Lode Mine, Deadwood and Boundary Falls, Thornton Jones. Now, if anybody doesn't know Gordon, every so often when you're near the post office, you'll hear the clock ringing. Well, Gordon goes up on Thursdays on his own time and winds the clock. And he also has been involved with the history of the mother lode. So if there's more that he'd like to add about himself, now's a good time. Thank you, Gordon.
Well, it's sure amazing what a small town can do. Hard work and dedicated people, and look what we've got here today. With a great turnout and lots of good representation from government levels and industry. So yeah, I've been winding that clock for about 30 years now, and it's still just doing fine. I've got old. So just going to read out a brief history, first of all, of the Deadwood Mine and Mother Lode mines, later Boundary Falls area. And it's interesting to note that the origins of some local place names in this area become quite apparent from these accounts. So Deadwood and Mother Lode mines, the discovery and early development of the Deadwood camp, which was mainly centered around the Mother Lode mine, is described by O.E. Leroy of the Geographical Survey of Canada as follows. In the Deadwood camp, the Mother Lode was located on May 23, 1891 by William McCormick and Richard Thompson. The Sunset, which is just above the Deadwood camp, the Sunset on June 2nd by John East, and the Crown Silver on the same day by William Ingram. Practically the whole area in the vicinity of the above claims was staked during subsequent years. The ores were found to be of a very low grade, although the bodies were apparently of large size. The self-fluxing qualities of the ore were only discovered at a later period when subjected to metallurgical tests. Only assessment work was done on the Mother Lode and nearby claims until 1896, when the property was bonded for $14,000 to Colonel John Weir, F.L. Underwood, and J.F. Titchener, who formed the Boundary Mines Company to develop the deposit. Surface trenching in the fall of that year and an adit and winds driven in 1897 disclosed the large size of the deposit and led to the formation in March of 1898 of the British Columbia Copper Company to bring the Mother Lode mine into production. In a remarkably short period of 2 years, the company not only brought the mine into production, but also constructed a modern smelter just south of Greenwood, 2.5 miles to the east. The first furnace was blown in on February 18, 1901. A report published in 1906 describes the conditions of labor at the mine as follows. And this is rather interesting. It also makes quite apparent the ethnic view of the day. However, that's all part of history as well. So, conditions of labor are as follows. The rules under which the men are employed are only those necessary to provide for general safety and efficiency, and, being far from stringent, are rigidly enforced. All work is done by day labor, the length of shift being 8 hours underground and 9 hours on the surface. There's no Sunday work done in the mine, and the day and night shifts change over every fourth night. The mine is run on open shop principles, although the Western Federation of Miners is the organization to which most of the men belong. There has never been a strike. The men are an exceedingly intelligent body, the foreign element not being present in such a large proportion as in most Western camps. And as the company takes excellent care of their welfare, any small difference is easily and speedily adjusted. The change rooms are conceded to be the best in the province. The bunkhouses are large, airy, and comfortable, and the boarding house is run on a principle which leaves no room for complaint and which spares no pains to satisfy the men. The company has built about 30 good-sized cottages, steam heated and electric lighted, which are left to married men, and numerous small cabins, also heated and lighted. The company also runs a well-stocked general store for the accommodation of the men, and there is a well-equipped reading room. Religious services are held every Sunday in the large hall in the boarding house. Each man pays $1 a month physician's and hospital fee in case of accident or ordinary illness contracted while at work, and has the care of the company's doctor. On the whole, the conditions of labor are almost ideal and are in sharp contrast with those in other mining camps in the West. So that's pretty good, you know, it's worth bragging about. So in 1896, Donald McLaren and his partner Colin McRae, which I think is probably Scotty McRae, right? Preempted a ranch a mile or so down the railway from the mine, and out of it established a 100-acre town site known as Deadwood, which functioned as the business and residential center for surrounding mines. The town contained 2 hotels, a general store, post office, blacksmith shop, real estate office, and numerous houses. The 100 or so families who lived in the town and its surrounding mines had an active social life with skating, sleighing, skiing, curling, hockey, tennis, and baseball. Card parties and dances were held frequently, and children who attended the one-room school in Deadwood looked forward to the annual Christmas party held at the Motherlode boarding house. There's a few production figures here, but it ties in with an explanation of the mining procedure. In the early years of production, ore was obtained from near the surface in a series of quarries that soon became one large glory hole. Underground mining was by open stopes. By 1911, most ore was obtained underground, and a new system of forced caving was introduced. A large number of holes were drilled, loaded, and blasted at once, breaking as much as 100,000 tons of ore. In 1913, a block of ore on the east side of the glory hole, 300 feet deep, had been prepared for mining by 5,000 holes loaded with 50,000 pounds of dynamite and connected with 16.5 miles of electric fuse. By August, the blast was ready for detonation. Nearby buildings were reinforced and blockhouses erected. All residents retired to Deadwood at the time of detonation, and there is reported to have been a festive mood and a picnic. Between 400,000 and 450,000 tons of ore was broken by this spectacular blast, one of the largest in mining history to that date. No damage was done to the surface installations, but the rim of the glory hole collapsed, sealing many of the openings through which the ore was drawn into the underground workings for transport out of the mine. The broken ground included waste rock and so reduced the grade that it became uneconomic as well as hazardous to mine. The mine limped along to the First War, but the drop in the price of copper at the end of the war brought the end of production. The mine closed in the autumn of 1918, and by 1919, only a few people remained. The mine never recovered from the big blast. In this early period, 3.7 million tons of ore was mined, which yielded 159,000 ounces of gold, 633,000 ounces of silver, and 70 million pounds of copper. Soon after closing the mine, machinery was removed, the heavier pieces being let down the hill on horse-drawn sleighs in winter, with ropes and pulleys attached to nearby trees and stumps. A salvage company from Vancouver dismantled the buildings, shipping the lumber to the prairies. No more work was done on the principal mines of the Deadwood camp for over 30 years. In 1955, Wood Green Copper Mines Limited began exploration in the area, and by early 1957 had built a concentrator at the Motherlode mine site. It operated intermittently until 1962, mining by open pit methods, the Motherlode and Sunset deposits. The manager throughout most of this period was CWS Tremaine. In 1962, the mill machinery was moved for use on Vancouver Island, but it was rebuilt in 1968 by Agro Mining and Oils Limited to treat ore from the Greyhound deposit near Deadwood. This was concluded early in 1971. In this period, between 20 and 40 men were employed. The copper concentrates were shipped to Japan for smelting. In 1973, Mascot Mines and Petroleums acquired the property and did extensive exploration without finding significant new ore. The mill was dismantled and all buildings finally removed in 1987. So between 1957 and 1971, 1.8 million tons of ore was milled, and concentrate shipped to smelters in Japan yielded 14.5 thousand ounces of gold, 66,000 ounces of silver, and 7.6 million pounds of copper. So that brings us of the on the Deadwood and Motherlode mines. Now this is a little more brief. The mining activity at Boundary Falls. The earliest development on the creek, being Boundary Creek, was the dam and power plant. In the winter, As early as 1860, placer gold was taken from Boundary Creek below the falls, and in 1865, the builders of the Dewdney Trail followed the creek to the falls before heading east over the hills. So we've got that tourist stop, historic stop at Boundary Falls that points out the Dewdney Trail. Some of the first production in the district of gold and silver from veins came from the American Boy claim, less than a mile northeast of Boundary Falls in 1892. In the same year, a stamp mill was built near Boundary Falls. Thus, the Boundary Falls site is the center of some of the earliest mining activity in the district. One of the earliest settlers was Bob Kerr, now we've got Kerr Creek, who had a ranch near the town. He was given the contract to haul ore to the mill, but when the owners could get no gold from the ore, they claimed that the gold was lost through the cracks in his wagon box. They've got to blame somebody. Not the geologist. The earliest development on the creek was the dam and power plant. In the winter of 1896-97, Robert Wood, founder of Greenwood, obtained a provincial charter to form the Greenwood Water Power and Light Company. A dam was built by August of 1898. Progress on construction of the penstock and power plant was slow, but the power plant was built by 1902. And it supplied power to the city of Greenwood and some of the nearby mines until 1920. The plant, built by Mr. Fotheringham of Spokane, was of cement blocks and was situated on the east side of the creek near the mouth of McCarran Creek. Water from the dam flowed through a wood-stave pipe to the power plant. Mr. and Mrs. Dockstetter of Greenwood, Mr. Dockstetter of Greenwood was the first manager, and Mr. and Mrs. Castleman operated the plant in its later years. So here we kind of have the unique situation of a woman in charge of an electric power generating station about 100 years ago. I hope her pay was equal to the rest of the people that work there. Between 1932 and 1939, considerable testing and placer mining was done in a section of the Boundary Creek below the falls, especially above and below the mouth of Norwegian Creek. In 1937, Boundary Creek Placers Limited completed construction of 10,000 feet of pipeline to bring water from the falls for hydraulic use. This pipeline was used in 1938 by Boundary Gold Placers Incorporated for placer mining, but the operation is reported to have been not successful, and the plant was dismantled in late summer. The relatively flat ground west of and below the falls is the site of the aerial tram terminal from the number 7 mine. The number 7 mine is about 2.5 miles east and 2,100 feet higher than the tram terminal at Boundary Falls. It produced about 14,000 tons of gold, silver, lead ore intermittently from 1901 to 1913 and continuously from 1934 to 1941. The aerial tram was installed by the Consolidated Mining and Smelting Company in 1910 and was dismantled in 1920. Caroline Castleman, now Mrs. D. Love of Penticton, recalls some of my earliest memories are of standing with my sister on our back porch waving at the men coming off shift at the empty ore buckets coming down from the number 7 mine. The smelter was blown in during 1902 and operated with several interruptions due to disrupted coke supply through 1905 by the Montreal and Boston Copper Company. The company owned the Sunset Mine in the Deadwood Camp, which we just talked about earlier, and the smelter was referred to as the Sunset, but from the start it was considered to be a custom smelter. In other words, it would take ore from any other mine in the area as well as from its own mines. Through the Dominion Copper Company, the New Dominion Copper Company, and the BC Copper Company, it controlled several mines in the area which supplied smelter feed. the principal of which were the Rawhide, Brooklyn, Idaho, Stemwinder near Phoenix, and the Lone Star in the Central Camp in northern Washington. And then, you know, as is usual with history, the more you read about it or learn about it, you know, the more questions crop up. And one of these with me is, how did this ore from the Lone Star actually get to the Boundary Falls smelter? Could have gone several different routes.
Actually, there was a tramway that came to Boundary Falls from there, from the Lone Star.
All the way from the Lone Star itself to Boundary Falls?
That's over top the hill.
Oh, okay, I didn't know
There's
that.
remains of it today still there.
Yeah, I knew there was a tramway from the number 7 mine
Yeah,
down
there's
to
two
Boundary.
different tramways.
Oh, okay.
5.5 miles that tramway from the Lone Star to Boundary.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's good to know. Okay, question answered there. Thank you. And so, just to conclude, the Boundary Falls town consisted of rows of buildings along the road and railway. Included were 1 or more hotels, a post office, a general store operated by Mr. and Mrs. Cruz, a school with as many as 25 pupils, and many family dwellings. By 1924, only 4 families remained at Boundary Falls, and about that time, many of the buildings were taken away. So there you go, a little bit of mining history in this area.
Thank you very much, Bert. The next person we have coming up and should be talking about the history of the BC. Here she is. Wendy, you perhaps don't know, is also a member of the museum, and she's quite well versed and taken a lot of study in her own time about heritage restoration as well. So we appreciate all her contribution in the various buildings and how to restore them. So, Wendy.
Hi, good afternoon.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
The BC Copper Company Limited was organized in New York in 1898 with a capital of $1 million to purchase and operate the Mother Lode mine and adjoining claims. In 1899 to 1900, the same company designed the smelter on a 70-acre site south of Greenwood. It is bordered on the east by Boundary Creek, with Copper Creek running through the site from the northwest. This smelter was originally built with a sheet metal smokestack that was replaced when it was blown down during a cyclone. Newspapers described the BC Copper Company smelter as one of the most complete and modern smelters that can be found in the world today. It is a model plant in every respect, and the machinery installed is the most modern known in engineering practice. The smelter was built to handle the ore from the Mother Lode mine. The ore body was typical of the low-grade copper deposits in the Boundary area, but the immensity of the body was the important feature of this mine. February 18, 1901 marked the blowing in of the first furnace. The smelter operated 24 hours a day, employing 47 men during the first year of operation. The smelter was served by the Columbia and Western branch of the Canadian Pacific Railway that ran below the works and the Deadwood branch line that ran above. Connecting tracks were constructed at 3 levels. A double track ran above the upper ore bins for delivery of the ore passing through the sample mill. A triple track ran over the smelter mixture bins and above the field yard. A single track ran below the converter building for the delivery of stores and the shipping of finished product. In 1903, the brick smokestack was constructed. It was the highest in the province at 121 feet tall and contains 250,000 bricks. In 1907, the old furnaces were torn out, the plant was remodeled, and 3 blast furnaces were installed. The smelter was said to be one of the finest in the Dominion of Canada. The plant had 3 mammoth furnaces with a daily capacity of 600 to 700 tons each. Originally, steam was used to supply power to the smelter. In 1904, the entire smelter and the Mother Lode mine were operated by electrical energy provided by the BC Construction and Distributing Company at Bonington Falls on the Kootenay River, some 80 miles east. This company later became the West Kootenay Power and Light Company Limited. The steam plant was kept to provide emergency power. In addition to the smelter buildings, there was an assay office, administration offices, superintendent's house, and the electrical company substation, to name a few. The Mother Lode mine crushed their ore before it was hauled to the smelter. Ore from other mines had to be crushed and was dumped into separate ore bins. An elevated tramway connected the bins to a sample building that had crushers, grinders, and 3 automatic samplers. An electric crane was used to convey the molten matte from the blast furnaces to the converters. For the first few years, the molten material was run into water. The molten slag, on striking the water, exploded into granules and was carried away by the water. The matte was trapped into matte bowls and cooled. The water matte was 45% copper and was shipped in boxcars to be converted into blister copper. After the new plant was installed, the product was blister copper and was 99% copper plus gold and silver. The waste slag was taken from the smelter by rail in 25-ton bell-shaped slag cars and poured out in its molten state. The waste slag glowed red in the night during the smelter's heyday. Some of the slag from these pots can be seen today. With the end of World War I, the demand for copper dropped, closing mines and smelters. This had an immediate effect on the city of Greenwood. The BC Copper Company smelter closed on November 26, 1918. Thank you. The city is currently working on a project that many of you have heard about, and it's the BC Copper Company smelter ruins. And the idea is to turn it into an internationally known site. So we're working, if anybody would like to know more about that, please come visit me in the corner and we can have a chat. Okay, thank you.
Next on the list for people is Jan Yonker, who's a member of the museum, and it's the history of the labor laws from 1899, 1900 mine safeties. Jan, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. We've all congregated here today to commemorate Greenwood's mining history, a history that truly confirms the city exists because of mining. Long before the city of Greenwood was incorporated during the summer of 1897, long before the city's founder Robert Wood obtained a Crown grant for what became the town site known as Greenwood City at the beginning of 1896, a miner had built a log house on some ground a 2 or 3 minute stroll north from here. A part of that mining history can be seen every day. Within sight of the parking lot outside, there are 2 buildings constructed prior to 1899 to serve as offices for assayers who analyze samples of ore from mines in the surrounding area to determine what they were worth. I'd like to provide some insights into the facts of life for men working in mines throughout southern British Columbia during the late 1890s and early 1900s, including in Boundary District. During February of 1899, British Columbia's Lieutenant Governor gave royal assent to amendments to existing legislation he said would, quote, tend to the advantage of miners and to the removal of grievances of which they have complained, while placing the important industry in which they are engaged on a better basis. One of these amendments became known as the Anti-Alien Labor Law, which prevented mine owners from bringing in miners from outside the province to replace those on strike or locked out. Another amendment provided that workers at metalliferous mines, meaning those yielding metals, not coal or other minerals, would be limited to 8 hours underground in every 24, soon being referred to as the 8-hour law. Mining company representatives objected to this law, insisting they'd been unaware such legislation was being sought, had only found out about it from newspapers, and how they should have been given the opportunity to express their opinions prior to the law being passed by the legislature. Citing the absence of any fact showing miners had been suffering in the past and had been complaining, these men asserted the 8-hour law wasn't asked for by the miners, and it was as great a surprise to the miners as it was to the owners. After a mid-April meeting of Greenwood and Phoenix area mine owners, they sent a message to the Minister of Mines, stating that local miners were entirely satisfied with the present hours of employment and have manifested no desire for a change in the system now in vogue. This message also stated a reduction in hours of work would make it necessary to reduce the wages per diem from a 10-hour to an 8-hour basis, thereby working great hardship upon the men and the consequent disturbance of the condition of employer and laborer as at present harmoniously existing. It seems to me that these two statements are turn-of-the-century examples of what we might call fake news. Early in June, in a Department of Mines notice published in the British Columbia Gazette, mine managers and owners were informed the 8-hour law would be enforced beginning 30 days hence. There were legislated penalties for not complying, but rumors soon began circulating through the mining towns and camps in southeastern British Columbia about mine owners forcing the government to suspend those penalty clauses and have 8, 9, or 10-hour shifts underground if their workers would agree. After enforcement of the 8-hour law began, some owners insisted their men had to work 2 hours on the surface after 8 hours underground. Some other owners, as had been forewarned, did reduce their underground miners' wages to $3 when they'd been paying $3.50 for a 10-hour shift. Their justification being the rate per hour was actually higher than it had been, which was true, 2.5 cents higher. So the miners at the Brooklyn and Phoenix and the Sunset in Deadwood camp refused to work. During July of 1899, the recently formed Dominion Copper Company acquired controlling interest in 6 mines at Phoenix, including the Brooklyn and Stemwinder. The company's managing director was a bitter opponent of the 8-hour law and ordered operations at the Stemwinder suspended. After the arrival of mine manager Frank Robbins, it was made known that Brooklyn and Stemwinder would remain closed until a change in the government's enforcement of the 8-hour law came about. With all the turmoil in BC's mining industry, the Dominion government stepped in, appointing a royal commissioner tasked with determining the number of miners employed in southern British Columbia, whether they were aliens, meaning not British subjects, the nationality of those who were aliens, the number of mining companies actually engaged in mining, the number of laborers imported under contract by the mine owners, and all circumstances connected with the importation of foreign labor. He was granted the power to summon witnesses, require them to give evidence under oath, and produce documents as he saw fit. Almost 100 interviews were conducted, including one with Frank Robbins. The Commissioner's report states Robbins thought the greater proportion of miners in the boundary country, and that's his term, not mine, were foreigners, the number who were British subjects being as low as 10%. This report identifies 26 Greenwood and Phoenix area mines by name, with additional references to the 9 mines that employ at least 20 men. During January of 1900, 4 companies operating 10 mines in the Phoenix area joined 31 others southern BC mining companies in petitioning Canada's Governor General for disallowance of the anti-alien labor law. The representative for one of these 4 companies was a co-signatory to a petition sent to Ottawa requesting the 8-hour law be overturned. Meanwhile, petitions for and against the 8-hour law were being delivered to the Legislative Assembly in Victoria. By early February, 3 opposition petitions had been presented, one of them signed by representatives for 11 companies operating mines in Boundary District. However, numerous petitions in favor of the law were submitted, including 2 from Phoenix, one from residents and the other from the local miners' union. One of my favorites is this 3-sentence petition from the Trades and Labor Council in Vancouver, representing 26 different unions. We humbly pray that your honorable body will abstain from interfering with the so-called 8-hour law, but will give it a fair trial of a period of years so as to judge its worth. We feel the agitation at present existing is being fomented by men who have no regard for humanity and whose only object is to amass a fortune at the expense of the working men. We respectfully urge upon your honorable body to stand by this law and to in no way interfere with its working. Another petition reads, "We have learned that your Honourable House is to be asked during the present session of the Legislature to amend the said Act and to repeal said restrictions of working hours in metalliferous mines. In the opinion of your petitioners, 8 hours are sufficient for miners to work underground, on account as well of the artificial and bad air breathed while working underground, the dangerous nature of the calling, and the fact that a slight mishap of a miner working underground not only endangers his own life, but also the lives of many others, as the fact that the work is of such an arduous nature under the certain conditions it is performed in, that a man would do as much and as good work in 8 hours as he would in a shift of a longer time. We, therefore, your petitioners, desire to state that we consider any such amendment is objectionable inasmuch as it would tend greatly to increase the hardships of the calling of a miner and would not be in the best interest of the said portion of the community or of the country as a whole." Kudos to whoever wrote this petition. It was signed by 312 citizens of Greenwood. By the way, it's an under-publicized fact that Boundary District mines were already on the world stage by 1900. 26 high-grade ore samples collected from 22 different mines in the area were on display at the World's Fair in Paris that year, intended to represent the mineral wealth of Canada. My next topic is a somewhat morbid one, but it's a part of the history of mining in Boundary District, which shouldn't be ignored. This is the first page of the British Columbia Mine Accident Index. The index covers the years 1878 through 1972. It's an alphabetical listing of the victims of fatal and non-fatal mine accidents during those 95 years of British Columbia's mining history. There are more than 6,200 entries on its 196 pages. And my research for a mine accident fatalities project undertaken for the Greenwood Museum a year ago revealed the index is incomplete. Additional commentary about how hazardous the occupation of a miner in British Columbia has been seems unnecessary, but I'll be speaking about the perils of mining as it happened in this area of the province referred to in Department of Mines reports as Boundary Creek Region, Boundary Creek Mineral Belt, and Boundary Creek District. A short drive east from here, there's a cemetery holding the graves of more than 50 men whose deaths resulted from accidents at mines 100 or more years ago. The first interment of a mine accident victim in this cemetery was during early March of 1902. Fully half of these miners interred at the Phoenix Cemetery were less than 30 years old when they died, 2 younger than 20. Many of these young men had immigrated from Scandinavian countries or Central Europe. 45 similar grave sites exist in other cemeteries. 19 are in Greenwoods. 2 of those date to 1898. Some are as distant as Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and Michigan. Lost sons brought home. These fatalities occurred during the period from the late 1890s until the shutdown of the smelters near Greenwood and Grand Forks and most of the Boundary District mines after World War I ended and the worldwide copper market collapsed. The abandonment of the city of Phoenix was a direct consequence. Many of the descriptions and fatality reports are graphic. Rockfall and cave-ins account for about 1/3. One accident killed 3 men. Falls down mine shafts or into ore chutes caused 25 deaths. A similar number were blasting related, premature explosions, drilling into missed holes, picking into unexploded powder, asphyxiation. Double funerals were not uncommon. During the period in which these 100 or so fatalities occurred, there were at least 130 mine workers injured in accidents. 2 men were injured twice during the same year. 3 injured men returned to their jobs only to die in later accidents. About 1/6 of the non-fatal accidents were blasting related. Eye damage was frequent and in most cases permanent. I trust I don't need to be any more explicit than that. Occasionally an accident resulted in a lawsuit. James Logan was severely injured in the explosion which killed his ship partner, a father of 4. The reference to Logan's injuries in the Minister of Mines annual report for 1914 is brief. Loss of left eye, injuries to arms, legs, abdomen, chest, neck, and face. About About 18 months after the accident, Logan was awarded $8,000. The judgment was appealed, but the appeal wasn't dismissed until 11 months later. I wonder how much an attorney's fee his employer paid over those 2.5 years. Antonio Cervio, not yet 23, had a foot amputated after it was crushed in an accident. He sought compensation under the Workmen's Compensation Act 1902. His claim would be disallowed if, quote, the injury to a workman is attributable solely to the serious and willful misconduct and willful neglect of that workman. However, the employer bore the onus of proof. Cervio's employer requested arbitration, and a year after the accident was ordered to pay Cervio a lump sum of $450 at $9 weekly until the amount, including the $450, totaled $1,500. Antonio Cervio's average weekly income during the 4 months he'd been employed by this company was $18 for 6 days' work as a shootman's helper. The explosive in common use during those days was known as giant powder. The primary ingredients were sulfur, sodium nitrate, and nitroglycerin. The Giant Powder Company of San Francisco became registered in British Columbia during 1897 to, quote, manufacture, purchase, use, and deal in dynamite and any or all other explosives and caps and fuse and all other materials and things necessary, useful, or convenient to such manufacture and use. The provincial government understood the importance of using explosives in minings and the importance of regulating that use. Legislation titled Explosive Storage Act required that bulk storage of explosives be no nearer than 2 miles from a settlement, 3.2 kilometers roughly. A blaster's needs would be supplied daily. The stone walls of a long abandoned storage magazine can be found in the hills to the east, southward from the World War I cenotaph standing near where the city of Phoenix once existed. I should mention many of the names the cenotaph displays are those of men who'd spent time as a miner. My vocation for the past 45 years has been forestry, although I held a blaster certificate for a number of years during the 1980s and have handled explosives. I still have my Blaster's Handbook. In it, I've bookmarked several references, including the cautions about premature blasts, drilling into unexploded holes, and toxic fumes, the same causes of fatalities as those just discussed. There's an entire chapter devoted to accident prevention. Anyone present here today who has blasting experience would undoubtedly be equally appalled by the reports for fatalities and injuries resulting from 2 causes I haven't yet mentioned. One of these is thawing explosives. There were 2 such incidents during 1900, one fatal and one not. Here are excerpts from newspaper articles recording them. About 4:30 Wednesday morning, 75 pounds of giant powder exploded in a thawing house at the old Ironsides. Frank Elmgreen, an employee, was about 20 feet from the building at the time and was hurt, but not very seriously. Not a vestige of the thaw house remains, nothing being left but a large hole in the ground to mark the place where it once stood. And the second one is, powder is thawed, but Jack Middleton lost his life. It is the old story. He tried to thaw out some frozen giant powder and exceeded with fatal results to himself. Apparently Middleton had put the explosive into cans and had placed the cans on the blacksmith's forge at the Gold Drop mine. The article states, it is thought that one of the cans must have leaked and some nitroglycerin got out. It is thought, you know. Overblasts took the life in each of 4 separate incidents, but the victims were not all men. One was a 2-year-old girl. In a company-owned cottage at the Motherlode mine just prior to 4 o'clock in the afternoon of August 17, 1908, Eunice Dimmick was sitting on her mother Anna's knee, a baby asleep in a carriage nearby. Less than 5 hours later, Anna was in Greenwood Hospital critically injured, and little Uni had passed away from the trauma of being struck by a boulder hurled through the roof of her home by a blast a few hours earlier at the mine about 275 meters away. That's the distance between here and the museum. Miraculously, the baby was unharmed. Anna's husband, James, a miner, had witnessed the blast from the company cookhouse. This was the second such overblast fatality at the Mother Lode mine. Almost 5 years earlier, a machinist was killed inside the shop where he worked by a 70-kilogram boulder tossed an estimated 175 meters. He was survived by his wife, his 3 children, aged 17, 13, and 5, and 2 stepchildren. Earlier, I had mentioned so many fatalities being immigrants. Turn of the century Boundary District truly was multicultural. There are more than 40 overseas places of birth recorded on 1901 and 1911 census records for the various census sub-districts ranging from Christina Lake to Anarchist Mountain. It is noteworthy, however, there were not any Asians enumerated at Phoenix. Sometimes the ethnic groups amongst the miners didn't get along with each other, as is demonstrated by one particular incident. Austrian Rode Merkovich's Welsh co-workers didn't attend his funeral at the Phoenix Cemetery, instead working their usual shifts. Afterward, a melee erupted at a saloon in Phoenix between Merkovich's understandably upset fellow Austrians and the Welshmen. Handguns were brandished and shots were fired, but fortunately there were not any serious injuries, although some of those involved were arrested and fined for their roles in the confrontation. As a comparison, the somber funeral procession for Chris Martin in Kingsmith during May of the previous year reportedly numbered well in excess of 800. The Granby Company mines had been shut down, and most of the city's businesses were closed during the procession. I'll conclude my presentation by mentioning the other victims of all those fatal mine accidents. Many of these men came from large families. The loss felt by the parents and siblings of those who died goes without saying. For those relatives whose son or brother had sailed off to North America, it is likely some never knew what became of him. More than 1/5 of the men listed in the fatalities displayed at the Greenwood Museum were married, 2 of them less than 6 months. 14 widows were left to care for fatherless children, including 6 with 4 or more. One of these women was expecting her 8th child when her husband was killed. Another was unable to keep her family together, porting out her eldest sons and moving to Arizona with her daughter and younger son. It appears the family was never reunited. She and her husband had raised all 4 of their children in Greenwood. No period was more tragic than the late spring and early summer of 1914. Of the 5 fatal mine accidents during the entire year, 4 during a 9-week period resulted in the deaths of 7 men. One wife had been preparing her 2 young children for the long voyage across the Atlantic Ocean and most of Canada to reunite with their father. Another was one of the 6 women mentioned as having at least 4 children. A third woman, widowed in her early 60s, the grandmother of 2. Her daughter was living at her childhood home with her own daughters at the time. The widows and their children and the men they mourned should not be forgotten, nor should the 80 or so other mine accident victims who lost their lives a century or more ago. This sentiment goes equally for the men who perished in mine accidents locally during the 100 years since. They are all a part of the history of mining in the Greenwood area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does the battery need changing or is it working okay? Yeah, I think it was cutting on and off. But we'll give it a try. We'll see how it works. The next group that we've got is Golden Dawn Minerals and Dr. Matthew Hall. Please. Are you here? Here. Here, here. Thank you.
Well, I just want to thank the City of Greenwood and the Greenwood Museum for allowing us to participate again and meet the community. It was over a year ago that we first introduced ourselves, and we're still here. We also participated in Founders Day, and where we cooked some nice, delicious German sausages, and hopefully we'll be doing that again this year. It's been an active year for Golden Dawn, and we are continuing to develop the mines in this area. Since the last time I spoke, we drilled a number of holes at the Maymac mine, and we extended our silver vein zone there. But we stopped working there so that we could focus on the Lexington and Golden Crown mines. So over the past year, we've pumped out the Lexington mine, and we're now preparing to start mining there. We expect to be mining later this year, possibly in June, if all things go well. We've been testing the rocks at the Golden Crown. We drilled 33 holes last summer and got very good results. We added to our property holdings with the Kettle River Resources property, and we've had geologists combing the ground there, looking at all the old mines, and we ourselves have been reading a lot of the history, and it's amazing the work that was done here in the early days. And it's amazing, you don't really appreciate when you go to these sites now. You see a rubble pile and a few old timbers, but then you look at the reports, and just like the previous speakers, there's a huge history here, and we look at through that history on every one of these prospects that we look at. Anyways, we've been sampling, and we've got good results, and we're still busy. When we were here last year, we were just an exploration group. We've now expanded. We have a few employees, maybe about 10 people now. If the mine is successful, we might be employing maybe 50 people, miners and all the support staff. We now took over the Boundary Motel in Greenwood. We've got a few miners staying there, and that's going to be developed some more this summer. So things are going well for Golden Dawn. We've got some freebies here, some bookmarks and coasters, and our brochure and some pictures. Rochelle is monitoring the desk there. Cal, our mine manager, has come down to meet everybody. So if you have questions about what's exactly is going on in the mine, Cal's got his finger on top of that. I don't want to keep you too long, but I do want to also introduce our CEO, Wolf Weiss, who's here for this presentation and unveiling of the statue. Maybe, Wolf, do you want to say a few words? So, yeah, we're here in the community. We hope to stay for a number of years and produce some more gold and copper. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And the next one we have on the list is the Chamber of Mines of Eastern BC, and David Johnson, please. Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It's nice to see you all. I drove over from Nelson, BC. That's where the Chamber of Mines of Eastern BC is located. The last few years, I've been really enjoyed getting to know Barry Knoll and building a relationship across southern BC. All of these towns that just reach out and touch the 49th parallel, we all have that in common. We have James Douglas, Lieutenant Governor James Douglas. Talk a little bit about history. He chose the 49th parallel. And why did he choose that? Because at the time we didn't have any neighbors. There were no states, there were no provinces near us. The 49th parallel was chosen because it's a straight line. It's a straight line that is just a little bit south of the three southern rivers that flow east and west. And as these rivers come in and out of the United States or flow in or back into Canada, those were pinch points. Those were places where the Dominion, where the British Empire could defend this area, with only 1,500 British troops in the area. A lot of people say the gold rush was fantastic. A lot of people know that the gold rush was a gold war. And James Douglas knew what was coming this way. He knew what was coming was the gold war from California. He knew that there was wars going on with the Yakima Indians at that time. Father Pandozzi was chased up into the Dominion of Canada by the American Bluecoats because he had offered comfort to the Yakima Indians when they were being starved out. So the 49th parallel is a big part of our history, and it's interesting to know when you talk about looking at the past through a modern lens, you can make a lot of a mess. But if you look at James Douglas through the modern lens, his father was a British captain, his mother was a Jamaican woman. She was black. He was a mixed race guy, and he understood that. So when the Gold War started happening in Yale, and prospectors were going up the river and then coming down dead on the river, floating in a circle in the whirlpool, he called for British Marines to help back up the new province, the new Dominion. And he called for them from Jamaica. So imagine the idea of this hall being filled with all the miners, and it happened right here. James Douglas had everyone come in here, and they locked the doors. And standing at the doors would have been 6-foot-tall black men, with 7 foot tall with the feathers, red, white, and blue, full British regalia, all the buttons and the muskets with the long bayonets on them. And they locked the doors, and James Douglas said pretty much what I just said to you. He probably said to these men that you know that you've had claims in other places. Some of you were chased out of the Dakotas. Some of you were chased out of California, cheated, and run out. But if you live here, and you work here, and you work with us, we'll protect your interests, and you can work, and you can mine here. And that's a little bit of history that I like to talk about sometimes. Another thing that we missed in history is that I always love to hear is the amount of ore and the amount of gold, silver, and copper that came out of this community in the 1800s and the early 1900s. But I just want to add, without modern diamond drill exploration, the work that was done around here is not unlike the work that has been done for thousands and thousands of years. People just knowing how to follow that vein. And it comes right down from when a man thousands of years ago had a slingshot. He wanted something very heavy. He'd find a nugget, and that would be really good for his sling. And it just went on from there. Some of the earliest mining ever done in this province was done in the late 1700s at the Bluebell mine on Kootenay Lake, and it was done by the Indians themselves. They smelted their own musket balls and traded them with the French before the Louisiana Purchase. So, if anyone is interested in prospecting, I'd like to do a little bit of a bump for the Chamber of Mines right now, and maybe come over to our table and I'll give you a card. But April 23rd to the 27th at the Chamber of Mines Research Center in Nelson, BC, we'll be offering our Prospectors course. It's a very popular course. The only other one like it is in the Yukon. It's $250 for 3 hours a night for 5 nights. A day gold panning on an active claim where everyone sees color. And then another day of driving around the Kootenays, taking a look at the mountain building process and understanding things from the micro to the macro level. Anyway, thank you very much. And if you have any other questions regarding history or that, come over to see Barry at his table. Come see me. And thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much. And the next person we have up is Barry Knoll with the Boundary Mining Association.
Well, it's great to see everybody. It's a real honor to be here, folks. I know everybody's passionate. I think we all share. That's why we're here. We've got some great surroundings. Like when I moved here and started going in the hills around here, it's amazing what's out here, and it's the passion is what keeps it alive. And I think people drive through our community every day, and they miss out what we have in our immediate surroundings. But there's a lot. There is a lot of history here, and I look at some of the things that our past has done for us and left us when these buildings we're in today. We're here because of people that came from around the world to enjoy the mining. And I think without it, we wouldn't be standing here. People in those days were coming from around the world on a whim, leaving their families, young men, packing up, going on the ocean, going to a new land, and hoping for the fame and fortune. And many of them lived here, raised their families here, died here, and their ancestors are still here. So, you know, the history is alive, and it's very passionate. But one of the things I really want to bring to the table today is the need for more people to engage, especially like for our associations. I'd love to membership drive to get some more people that want to be more about the history and want to get together and talk about that history, but be part of coming out and being on the side of the table and helping out with a lot of things, because we do have a lot of things to offer, and the Boundary Mine Association could use some more members. So if anybody wants to be a part of that, I would gladly love to talk to you folks and get you to come and be part of it. We've got some great people here today, and there's some great people in the audience that are very passionate about history. I really hope you guys, after this discussion, as you come around and you all mingle, get to know each other, because there are people everywhere that would have the same passion. So it's all about that moment. So thank you very much for coming, and it's a real pleasure.
Thank you very much, Barry. And Barry did bring out a point too. We do have people speaking up here, but there are people in the audience that also have a lot of knowledge and information. And that's why we're gathered here, so you can collaborate, get together, and share that information. Now, the next person on the list, or the next company, is, if I pronounce it right, Eximin? They're not here. So we just acknowledge that there is that group that's within the community. And the next one after that is Echo Bay in Kinross. And Peter Cooper is the name that I've got. So Peter, please.
Thanks, sir. Thank you. All right, well, first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for this invitation to be here and a chance to speak on behalf of Echo Bay Minerals, which, for clarification, is a wholly owned subsidiary of Kinross Gold Corporation. I'm not a representative of the company. I'm recently retired from the company. But I put together some notes that speak to the value of mining in general to society and specifically to this area. And I'm speaking about the recently closed Buckhorn gold mine on the south side of the border. A little scary to hear some of the talk earlier about the wars over gold in the boundary, but Kinross is a Canadian incorporated and headquartered company. We happen to have operations. They happen to have operations in 9 different countries around the world, including the U.S. Sadly, none in Canada, but there's work underway trying to remedy that. For those not familiar with the Buckhorn mine, it's located a little over 2 miles due south of Rock Creek. So very close. Could have just as easily been on the north side of the border. And given the continuity of geology from one side of the border and across, there's every chance that there's another Buckhorn somewhere on this side of the border. The Buckhorn mine was in production from 2008 to 2017. The last ore came out of the mine in May of last year. Over those 9 years, it produced 1.3 million ounces of gold. It exceeded its pre-production predicted mine life by 2 years, and it produced over 200,000 ounces of gold more than the pre-production reserve. The value to the company of that operation, so this is the cash flow generated by the mine. So this is essentially profit after the cost of acquiring the ground, finding the ore, developing the mine, paying the miners, paying the taxes, etc. The net benefit to the company was over $500 million, over $500 million earned over the course of a 9-year mine. Of that $500 million, well over $100 million was spent on goods and services in Ferry and Okanagan counties. So in two small, sparsely populated counties in Washington State, there is an economic benefit of over $100 million. It supported over 450 full-time jobs. A little under half of that were direct company jobs, and the balance were contract. Direct payments to governments by way of taxes exceeded $10 million. I live in Okanagan County, and the mine is located in Okanagan County, and the loss of that tax revenue is just now beginning to be felt as we see our tax rates increase, with the loss of over $1 million a year in taxes to the county. Echo Bay, I mentioned that Kinross is trying to remedy not having production in Canada. They did at one time, but they sold those properties. But the company's been active in the Boundary District over the past couple of years and will continue to be over the course of this year. And total expenditures through 2018 are expected to be on the order of $1 million. So if I can circle back to some of the comments I made originally, the $500 million ore body that is a mere 2 miles south of the border, there could be one of those within reach of this community. So again, thanks for the invitation, and it's great to see such an appreciation of the mining heritage of the area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's the end of the people that we were going to have to speak. I do want to thank Al Wright for setting up. I don't know if Al's still here or not. There he is. As with any organization, there's a lot of work that's done behind the scenes, and some of it's quite extensive, and again, with a lot of information, as you heard, there can be the need to collaborate, to correct some references, and to research it. Then you have to get everybody together, so it takes time. We thank everybody for helping out, and Nell for doing that within our group. At this time, I just wanted to mention, if you've got the little program that we had produced, there is a wheel on the back, and that one was just depicted to show the hub, Greenwood, and if you look at the reference to it, there were a number of places all the way around, and it just showed how we were central in a lot of activities and places within the region. So I want to thank everybody for allowing me to be able to introduce and be able to facilitate all the people. I want to ask everybody to give a round of applause and thank you for those that did come up and speak, and also all those that have helped out, including passing out the cake. That's a little extra that we've got, and for all those within the community that have helped over the years and with our future projects. So thank you very much. Thank you very much again. Take care.